You worked for the Diocese of Bridgeport for 26 years, and you're currently a teacher at St. James School in Stratford, and your background in education came through in all your dialogue and conversation with us. You have afforded us great feedback here as a group with your knowledge and education, and I think that we have been able to provide a better place for students because of you. Spoiler alert, cover your ears if you don't want to hear about maybe something coming in the budget. But we are visioning elementary science labs, and that requires a space. That's not something that we're going to be able to add on to our elementary schools. It's not something that we're going to retrofit a storage room. It needs a full classroom space. Again, in the 60s, likely, when some of our buildings were put up, they weren't visioning, let's put in sinks and let's add an extra room for a science lab. It just wasn't a thing at that time. So that will be scooping up a room, hopefully, in each one of our elementary schools. Visioning forward, we're looking at putting in video production rooms in all of our schools. That potentially could start happening next year at the elementary, depending, fingers crossed, on the budget. A picture to the right is a robotics engineering classroom for our young people. Imagine space that we... So please remember, as we message to our community, that while enrollment's declining, we're better utilizing our space to provide programming and to meet the 21st century needs of our students. So it's just something to keep in mind as we dialogue with our community about declining numbers. Doesn't mean that it's a declining use of space. Actually, it's a maximized use of space in our schools. At this time, we'll take questions from the board. Questions, board members?
The enrollment decline would be greater on the east side of town than the west side of town, so I think it was expected that. So, I mean, I think word that is a sticky word that is, firm.
I don't believe that those references harm this policy because they act as a context and backdrop.
Sure.
Whether you're quoting them or not, they're part of a context for this policy.
Okay. Any other questions on this policy with the changes that were made? Or comments? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. P6120 learning.
Move that the Milford Board of Education approves Board Policy P6120 learning.
Second that.
Second by Mr. Fermender. Is there any discussion on the policy and with the changes that were requested? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. P6145.2, extracurricular activities.
I move that the Milford Board of Education approves Board Policy P6145.2 extracurricular activities.
Second that.
Second by Mr. Fermender. Any discussion? Mr. Dion.
I was wondering if you could speak to,
Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
So glad to have Mr. Riccitelli present to you our annual athletic program report.
Community, that's like, I always tell this story when my daughter was in high school. She participated in the powder puff game and she actually scored a touchdown. And she, in her yearbook at the end of the year, she put that was her shining moment. That was what she'll remember the most of anything of her high school years, was scoring a touchdown at the powder puff game. So it's a lot of fun. But it also, I will mention that both of the accounts are closely monitored and they are subject to the annual state audit. So the general fund, out of the athletic fund, the board provides for coaches' salaries, transportation, athletic trainers, insurance, equipment, supplies, and uniforms. Out of the athletic activities account, generally these are the expenses that we have, what we call game day operations. Those things that we have to pay for on game day. Things like game officials, part-time staff like ticket takers, scorekeepers, announcers, officials for the game, and police officers. The athletic activities account, as I said, it is generally funded, well, I didn't say this yet, but the athletic activities account is generally funded by gate receipts at those sports that do charge to get into. But that's not enough to cover all of the game day operations. So your board does supplement it with funds from the general fund that are then transferred to the student activities or athletic activities accounts to supplement those game day operations. So here's just a breakdown of the small donations. And I say this every year, believe it or not, we do get royalties for the foreign-in-law names. When there's like a sweatshirt or a t-shirt that's sold in one of the stores, like
Stop
any of the
Shop.
stores around town, we get a small royalty for it. So as I point out with the asterisk, some of these expenses are paid out of athletic activities, but this is everything for the sports broken down by category. And again, I won't go through each one, but you can see the amount that was paid for, coaches, a little over $500,000, transportation at $222,000, the officials and so on. For total expenses for athletics for 18-19 of $1,360,803. So ticket sales, I said that ticket sales funds the game day operations, and then it doesn't cover it. And the reason for that is game day, the cost of game day operations continue to rise. Police officers, there's an increase each year in what we pay the police officers. There's an increase each year in what we pay the officials for the games. From time to time, our contract for ambulance service will go up. So the costs continue to rise, and as I'll show you in a minute, the gate receipts are pretty level. You can't charge much more than what's charged now, and I think it's $5 to get into a contest, and that's throughout the state of Connecticut. So game day operations, gate receipts are pretty level, but the costs continue to rise. And they're also, they vary, gate receipts vary by the weather. If you have an extremely cold or extremely wet football season, you'll see that football is the biggest gate receipt, takes in the most money. If a team is doing extremely well, there's more people that come to the games, and if they're not doing so well, sometimes toward the end of the season, attendance might lag a little bit. So that also affects the gate receipts. Here is just a breakdown. Again, you can look at every one of them, of the gate receipts for the different sports. You can see football is the major driver. So if we have a wet season and that number goes down, it's difficult. So total we took in ticket sales in 18-19 of $93,598. And this is just a history. As you can see, we average about $95,000 a year in ticket sales, but it's pretty consistent. So students participating by sport, you can see each, it varies, but there's great participation. We have approximately, I'm going to say 1,500 or so students between the two high schools, and roughly a third of the students participate in an athletic sport in one of the seasons. And obviously, some students participate in multiple seasons, so you can't just add the numbers for each season. There's students that are counted twice or three times, but you can see the numbers. Then the expenses broken down by sport, and they're here for you to look at. And then we divide that is reflected in the player participation fee. In the 12-13 year, hockey players were paying $850 per player. And then when the board changed it, you can see it now, for the last 3 seasons, the participants have been paying $200. So the board's support is greatly appreciated by the parents of the hockey players. Girls hockey, we have a co-op, but it's not under Milford Public Schools' purview. Our girls can participate in a co-op team that consists of Notre Dame of Fairfield and Pomperaug, believe it or not. So they're both eligible to play. Notre Dame's participation fee per student, boy, I'm getting tongue twisted here, is $1,500 per player. In 15-16, the board was contributing $600 per student who wanted to play on the girls' team. And in the 18-19 school year, your board raised that contribution up to $1,300 per player so that it's equal to what the boys play. The girls who do participate in that co-op, their families have to pay $200 and your board pays the other $1,300 that goes to Notre Dame. You can see, and since you've added that increased amount of money, you can see the participation has gone up considerably also from 40.
So, you noted that we're allowed to co-op if we have, is it under 14 students? So we have 16. Is there, I remember hearing at one time that there was, if you are over that number, but for a certain number of years, they don't let you co-op anymore, so.
14 per school.
Per school, okay,
Yes.
all righty.
At any one given school.
Okay, I
So
thought it was 14 total.
If law went, and BJ can speak to this, but we'll say
Okay.
if law went over 14, then there's a grace period of a year or
Right,
two.
okay.
Sure, so we're required to apply for the co-op.
Team, so, right. I meant the boys. All right, thanks so much for this.
Thank you, and at this time, we'll
Like,
Other questions on the monthly report? I wanted to ask, there's 2 vacant stipends at Johnson Law for, I think just at Johnson Law, for winter sports. Are those, have they been filled yet, or are they going to be able to be filled?
Yeah, we still have them posted. I don't know the exact, is BJ still here? I don't know the exact update on them, but I haven't seen anyone fill them off the desk yet.
Okay.
We're hoping to obviously fill them. We have a
Coming up
couple weeks.
quickly.
Couple weeks, weeks.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, and then my annual report, Job sees that it's almost 100% online these days. We hired approximately 214 employees as new hires in that time period of 11/1/2018 to 10/31/2019. This includes the 36 new teachers and 6 new administrators hired for the 19-20 school year. We continue to do all of the legal statutes, background checks, fingerprinting, TB testing, DCF checks, educational employer verification checks, 6 in the morning or 6:15 in the morning every day to try to, although the system calls out and people can call into it, we can do it online or through the telephone. We have a live person here that makes calls actually that early in the morning to people to try to get them to get to one of our assignments. So we can fill those as much as possible. We respond to third-party requests for information, obviously banks, attorneys, freedom of information requests. We monitor our certifications for all of our certificated employees, teachers and administrators, coaches, et cetera. And we typically are in 100% of compliance with the State Department of Ed with regards to teacher certification. We take that very seriously, and we don't cut corners there. Let's see. State reports, of course, we all have to do those. We have 8162, which I just completed, that had a November 1st due date. And the EDS, which is the system where all of our teachers, all of our administrators, exactly where they're teaching, what they're teaching, their FTE, their locations, have to be precisely inputted into that system. And Carole Altieri in my department handles that. We respond unfortunately to a lot of unemployment claims and appeals every year. We got about 188 unemployment claims this year. When I get a claim in, I have to fill out a form. If it's something that I want to appeal and fight against, I may have to show up in person down here in Bridgeport or Hamden or those types of things. As a municipality, I mention this every year because many people don't realize this, we pay dollar for dollar every single unemployment claim that we get. Whereas private industry, they're pooled together and they pay like a tax, but we pay dollar for dollar, so we try to save money when we can there. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about our hiring season last summer, which continues into the early fall. We still have, unfortunately, 2 positions available, and actually now it's 3 because somebody just resigned. But we need a school psychologist, anyone knows anybody? And a .8 FTE music teacher. And we are utilizing long-term substitutes in these roles, so while they're open.
Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Questions on the monthly disbursement report? Mr. Arnold?
Yeah, on page 33,
Let's see.
How far down is that?
Yeah,
middle of the page.
Middle of the page.
show 6901.
Bucket, right?
Oh, it's the, it's the nomenclature that they put, it's
It's not free.
no, it's not
Not
free.
free.
It's a monthly fee that we pay for them to service and provide all supplies for the printers. So we call it free, it's free to the schools because it's no longer carried in their budgets. It's carried by the district in this account. But it's a new program this year that will save money. Rather than going out to suppliers at every school, we have one vendor that services all of the printers. We pay one fee and they provide the service and the supplies for them. But it isn't free, no. Thank you, we'll change the name on that.
Dramatic difference between those two
Well,
items.
it's the, I'm sure it's the
Is it
quantity.
a cart?
Yeah, it's more than
No,
one.
it's the quantity, that's more than one.
budget, and that, which, you know, every new board does. But then we also were faced with trying to hire a new superintendent. And I just wanted to specifically thank Ms. Federico and Ms. Casey. You guys really sort of just kept a steady ship for us. It was a hard transition to make. And for myself anyways, you guys made it very smooth. So we really appreciate it, and I will really miss both of you on the board.